Hi everyone, welcome to my breakdown video for Rise Again, our latest song that was part of HoYoFair this year. If you're new here, welcome. A quick little intro from me. I'm WUNDER RiKU. I'm a songwriter, composer, producer, lyricist. You might know some of my other work with HoYo that I've done in the past. Last year, myself and Rita Kamishiro, we wrote a song called Method, which won first place for the Multiverse Vistas competition. We then did a song around about this time last year called that was about Sunday and Robin, and then this is our latest project that we've done in conjunction with HoYoVerse, which is kind of under the banner of Amphorius the Musical, which was an amazing brief to sort of be given. And Rise Again is the first of two songs that we have written as part of this theme of Amphorius the Musical. Rise Again is kind of meant to tell the story so far of kind of halfway through the kind of Amphorius arc. So as a result of that, this kind of tells the story, focuses on the story of Finan and the other Chrysos heirs, but mostly from Finan's perspective. And it's all about the loss that is kind of felt as he slowly comes to terms with spoilers. If you've not played the Amphorius arc of Honkai Star Rail, there will be spoilers for the rest of this video. The music has so many spoilers in it, but Finan finds out that Flame Reaver, who is this kind of evil presence that has been hunting down the Chrysos heirs this whole time, is actually him, but a previous version of him. There's loads of time loop shenanigans going on. Myself and Rita Kamishiro were put to the task of writing this. Rita was our kind of expert in the lore and the lyrics, and for me, I was writing the instrumental, the music, and some of the melodies, although Rita did a lot of the melody writing too to go along with her lyrics. This is quite possibly the biggest project I think I've ever been involved with. The song features not one, but two orchestra recordings. There is a reason for that I'll get into. There is a choir, there's a whole ensemble of folk musicians, and all of these instruments were recorded live by real players. A lot of them, I was there in person for the recordings of them. There was an accident in the studio right after one of the recordings. It was no one's fault, but unfortunately, an entire half of an orchestra recording got accidentally permanently deleted right after the session was done. So as a result, I salvaged what I could, and kind of half of the recordings there, and half of it wasn't. As a result, we needed to re-record the orchestra. We couldn't get back into the same studio with the same team because the studio was about to go under huge renovations to upgrade the studio, so we couldn't book extra time. When that happened in the studio, it's quite possibly the most difficult and stressful thing that's ever happened to me in my entire career, to lose hours worth of recording in one press of a button, in front of a lot of people as well, and also in front of a lot of my own students who were there kind of shadowing me for the recording session. So yeah. As well as doing all the arrangement, I did all of the scoring and the orchestration for it, for the notation. And then I also, for some absolutely ridiculous reason, did all of the mixing and mastering myself too. And as a result, this project has been going on for 9 months. As well as that, we had this incredible music video made for it by the incredible Dylan Gu Studios, which is an absolute dream come true for both me and Rita. I've talked about the concept a little bit, but with Amphorius the Musical, some of the musical influences that we were kind of looking at were things like Epic the Musical was a reference that was suggested to us, and on Rita's side there was a musical called Nerdy Prudes Must Die that influenced some of the ideas that she had. And then for me, I was kind of listening to a bit of Prince of Egypt for some inspiration too. I think you can kind of hear all those elements come together in this composition to make something special, but at the same time, for me, the biggest thing was capturing the sound of Amphorius. What does Amphorius sound like, and how do we use that as a storytelling device in the arrangement for this song? As well as Rise Again and Never Fall, me and Rita are releasing a HoYoVerse EP, which has a collection of all the songs that we have done so far for Honkai Star Rail and ZZZ. So as well as Rise Again and Never Fall being on the EP, you can also listen to Liberame, which we released last year, Method, which we won the Multiverse Vistas competition with, and also a song that hasn't been released on streaming platforms before was Hop, which is a song that a ZZZ fan song that we did too. Including those, we also have our self-covers of Rise Again and Never Fall that me and Rita have done, where we have reinterpreted these songs a little bit with our own spin and sung them as duets, which this actually makes for my vocal debut, I guess, as WUNDER RiKU. So you can enjoy listening to me singing on there, duetting with Rita. So with all that out the way, let's get into breaking down this song. I think just before we play the video, though, what I want to do is show you a little bit of my score. There's a few motifs that kind of happen throughout the piece that are all kind of from the scores to Amphorius and Honkai Star Rail. And there's lots of reasons for these being used. So first of all, there's this motif here, this rising kind of motif. I'm just going to play this. So this motif comes from the boss music for Flame Reaver. There's a couple of tunes on the original soundtrack. You can hear this. The one is Touch of the Broken Blade, and the other one is A Hunt for the Divine. This is Flame Reaver's theme, and this gets used a hell of a lot. There's lots of other motifs from the Flame Reaver boss music that you'll hear as well, such as this. This very European folk tune style melody. And as well as that, we have this melody too, which is called Wandering Rhymes, I believe. And that plays in Okema, the Eternal Holy City. It's one of the themes that kind of plays around that area whilst you're in it. And it has a very sing-song kind of folky vibe to it. There is a vocal part in the original as well that doesn't have lyrics on it. And as well as that, there is one other big track that we kind of quote a lot, and that is this motif here. And that is the Anthem of Eras, which is kind of the main theme for Amphorius and the Chrysos airs. It's a motif that is used quite a lot throughout. It's very triumphant. It's anthemic, like Anthem of Eras. And there's one other piece of music that gets used quite a lot too, and that is called Battle Hymn of the Golden Blooded, which is also from the Okema. And that sounds a little bit like this. And that melody also gets used quite a lot. So those melodies, then we have the Flame Reaver boss music. We've got the Anthem of Eras, the main theme and heroic themes of Amphorius. We've got the Wandering Rhymes kind of folk song. And then we have this Battle Hymn of the Golden Blooded. And basically, these 4 tracks from the OST are all used in basically every single section of the song in lots of different ways to tell the story. One of the challenges that we had was that Finon didn't have like a theme at the time when we were making this. And so we needed to find a way to represent Finon. And again, I mean, you should have already heard the spoiler warning by now, but with Finon being Flame Reaver, what I decided was that Flame Reaver has a motif in the song, and so we can use those to create motifs for Finon and to hint at the truth of who Flame Reaver is, and those links together. So that was the plan. So we're going to go from the start of the song now. This video is sponsored by no one. It's sponsored by me. If you've listened this far into the video so far and you've enjoyed it, I'd really, really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more breakdowns and also releases that I have coming out soon. I've got so much music coming out just in the next couple of weeks, so I really don't want you to miss it. I'm going to be doing more breakdown videos here to talk about the process and also to share more exciting things with you. So thank you for watching so far, and please subscribe, leave a comment, leave a like. It all helps so much. So in this opening section, we have the Wandering Rhymes theme, like I mentioned before. It's being played on the guitar and on the bouzouki. The guitar is playing it in octaves, and then we have this children's choir singing this melody around the Wandering Rhymes melody too. It's something that the melody already sounds very folky. It sounds quite children's nursery rhymey, and we thought this would be really good to use as like an establishing kind of thing to set the scene of the lore of Amphorius and the world of Amphorius. And that's what this is. We've kind of created this almost legendary kind of folk song that it might exist in this world that's been passed down for generations about the world and the lore and the gods and the golden blooded and the flame chase of Amphorius. Underneath this, the tenors and basses join in halfway through, singing this melody underneath. And this is a minor key interpolation of the Anthem of Eras theme. And that's going to set up a lot of what happens later on in the piece. We have like the big major key triumphant version of it and the minor key version of it as well that's used to kind of show this transition from hope, which is where the story of Amphorius kind of starts, in this place of hope, and then slowly these feelings of despair grow and grow and come through in the story as things get more and more hopeless and futile in the story. And where the Rise Again kind of finishes in the story of Amphorius is at that kind of midpoint, low point in the kind of hero's journey where it feels like all is lost and all is hopeless. We next move on to the next section where the orchestra kind of come in earnest. This is where we kind of hear Anthem of Eras in a really big way. So let's have a listen. So then at the beginning of this instrumental section, we have in the horns the melody of the chorus of the song of Rise Again, that's kind of hinted at. And then is then joined in with the trumpets and trombone in the brass. In this kind of fanfare sort of way. So we're establishing the chorus motif, and we have these like tremolo strings kind of being played to create suspension, and then we have this motif, the one that you've heard already. Flame Reaver's theme. But we've kind of made it sound quite triumphant. It resolves onto this big major chord, this big E7 major chord, which at the moment we've started in the key of D, and then we've got this chord progression B minor 7, E minor 7, G add 9, E7, and that E7, you'll notice, in our key normally we should have an E minor 7 in the key of D, but it's changes to a major version This is called modal interchange. What this does is that it really brightens that sound. It makes it feel really triumphant to add this extra major chord that should normally be a minor chord in this key. And so it's kind of softening the darkness of this motif by harmonizing it in this way. And that's kind of what we wanted to do. We're like making this Flame Reaver's theme seem really bright and triumphant in this kind of way, because we're associating it with final at this point, not with Flame Reaver. Then as we go through, we have, again, the horns kind of like implying the chorus melody a little bit here. With the deliverer's arms will carry us on till, whilst more instruments join in with that Flame Reaver motif. And the harp playing these triplets that you'll hear in the original Anthem of Eras. And the whole choir joining in with that Anthem of Eras melody in octaves. While the strings add some rhythm to it. And then we also have the border pipes. Which is such a huge part of Anthem of Eras in the original. Like the pipes and the choir were kind of a must for this arrangement to capture the sound of Amphoreus. So then, when we move to the next section of the song, we have a little bit of a tone change, and the real kind of sound of the song kind of kicks in with this instrumental section. So we've got this melody that again has been interpolated from Flame Reaver's theme. In Flame Reaver's theme, it's basically just this bar. Basically that. And what I wanted to do was create a kind of whole folk tune out of it. So I made a couple of small alterations to it. You have this second phrase, you have this note changing here. And then I added this turnaround phrase, which is sounds like a very typical folk, European folk song turnaround kind of phrase at the end, just to flesh that out. And again, while this is very dark sounding in the original song, it's harmonized with these really bright major chords. So we get A major, C major, G major. It's all major chords harmonizing what should be a very dark, minor sounding melody, which it will sound that way at the end of the song. At the moment, we want it to sound adventurous. To do that, we're in a modal scale called Mixolydian mode. It's like a major scale, except there's one note different, which is the seventh. The seventh is usually sharpened in a major scale, and it's flattened in this case. So we're in this D Mixolydian scale, and Mixolydian mode is very common in folk music, and it also sounds very powerful and triumphant. A lot of fanfares are all in Mixolydian mode as well. And it's kind of what is making this all sound very triumphant. And this verse, as we go into the verse again, we're all in this kind of Mixolydian mode. You can see all of these C's, which should normally be C sharp in the key of D major, have all been naturalized, or they've all been flattened down to a C natural. As well as the folk tune being from Flame Reaver's theme, we also have this riff section here. Mostly being played in the brass, and this is also a bass line that comes from Flame Reaver's theme, and you'll hear that again later on in the track in its original kind of minor key sounding context, but with all the big bright major chords underneath, it sounds way more bouncy and adventurous. It still sounds a little bit dark, but it sounds more like adventurous and positive in this kind of reharmonization. And after that, we move into the verse. The verse is where a lot of the storytelling, particularly in verse 1, of it talking about who the Chrysosaurs are. And because this is like them at the beginning of their journey, it's got to be really positive. So that's kind of what we were going for this.
Lead us forward into an endless journey to rise above.
So in this first section, we have in the string sections, Battle Hymn of the Golden Blooded is kind of being alluded to in the harp and in the strings. This. We'll hear that again later on, particularly in the choir right after the first chorus in its original minor key kind of sound. But we have swapped it out with the major key intervals of the key that we're in the verse. So it's kind of subtle, and you might not pick up on it. But what I just wanted to do was interweave this idea of like these motifs that run throughout the song. The harp being a really key part of the sound of Amphoreus. Amphoreus is all based on Greek mythology, if you weren't already familiar with it. So there was a lot of that trying to be captured too. The harp is obviously a very iconic sound of that world. So yeah, in verse 2, this motif runs through all of verse 2 as well, except in that context, it is in that minor key kind of sound that you originally hear it in Battle Hymn, the Golden Blooded. So yeah, I kind of worked backwards a lot of this arrangement. I started with like all these minor key themes that I wanted to use to kind of show the struggle and the darkness of the story that the song will end on. It will end on with Flame Reaver. But before we got to that point, I wanted to kind of foreshadow it by taking all of these dark minor key melodies and putting them in these kind of major key contexts, whether that's turning the theme into like a major key theme, or just reharmonizing that minor key sounding melody with some chords that make it sound a bit brighter. So those are the kind of two approaches I was taking. So yeah, as well as that then, in the Bouzouki part and in the fiddle, which is what we call violin in a folk context, and the whistle, we have these little melodies as well, which are 3 separate little melodies that happen in Anthem of Eras. In between the big da 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 da, there are these little melodies that come in with it, and I joined them all together to make this one big long folk melody that kind of sounds like this. And that just very subtly, quietly plays underneath the rest of the verse material. As we get to the second part of the verse, we'll just have a quick listen to that. You'll hear the strings kind of re-emphasize that Battle Hymn, the Golden Blooded motif.
Guide us towards tomorrow through the dark skies. You'll keep on fighting on and on and on until the sunrise. We never knew about the truth, but you opened up our eyes and then you turned it all around. Our time is starting now. So
we have that dun 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 melody in the string parts now throughout the whole string parts. So you get the violins joining in with it too. And that is a major key version again of what happens in the same part of verse 2, which you'll hear here. So again, lots of really fun foreshadowing in the arrangement there. As well as that, in this section, because we only have one voice singing, because it's kind of fine on telling the story, I wanted to have some of the instruments kind of play with Rita's voice. So I got the fiddle and the whistle to kind of harmonize the melody, as you can hear in the fiddle part here. And the whistle as well also doubles that, harmonizes with that too. Both these instruments are very lyrical. They play in a similar range to the vocal. So it's fun to kind of almost treat them like a vocal, which is what I did here, and have them playing along with Rita's voice to fill out that texture. As we get to the pre-chorus then, We have another couple of musical references. You've already heard the Flame Reaver theme a billion times already by now, but you're going to hear it again in the bass.
But how will we know?
But all these bright major chords,
They're played from
and now we hear that minor chord.
But even if I can't
Alterations to that now, and the Wandering Rhymes theme is in there too. So yeah, we have that Flame Reaver theme in the bass line of this section, particularly in the cellos there, taking the prominent lead in that. And we have, like, over this part, this minor chord, this G minor chord, what should normally be a G major chord that you hear in the bar before, turned into G minor. More modal interchange. There's a big tug of the heartstrings there when that happens. I extend that melody as well. So the top note of that melody now goes higher on the third time round, and the melody kind of continues. And as well as that, we also have in the harp this little melody that comes at the end of Anthem of Eras. And then into Wandering Rhymes. That melody you hear at the very beginning of the song, that folk tune. And when that's all layered on together, it kind of builds up this tension into the chorus. We get this big sforzando, which is just like a very short, sudden, loud kind of burst. And that gives way to the border pipes and the choir in this next section.
There's something deep inside. I'll chase the fire, I'll take the fall. The golden blood
Choreography's so cool in this section.
The deliverer's arms will carry us all till we'll reach the end and rise again. We'll rise again.
So then, in this chorus section, we have the Anthem of Eras kind of melody taking a big part of it. In the original score that this is from, that is also played on a type of bagpipe instrument. It's probably not border pipes. It's probably a Greek or a version of that instrument from that part of the surrounding kind of area. But all I had access to, the closest thing I had access to, was a border pipe, which difference between a border pipe and a bagpipe is that the border pipe doesn't have, or doesn't need to have a drone on all the time. You can turn the drone off. A drone's that big, long, low note that always happens whenever you hear bagpipes. There's always this big, like underneath the whole time. You can turn that off on a border pipe, which means you can play with other musicians a lot easier. When you've got chords changing and stuff, it makes it a lot easier to work with. So yeah, we've got these border pipes, and we also have the choir singing these woes on that melody too. And what I wanted to do was write a chorus melody. This is one of the melodies in the song that I kind of wrote that filled in the gaps and the space in that. So you get the whoa, I'll chase the fire, I'll take the fall. Oh, the golden blood is standing tall. So the idea was that it would interject in this call and response texture with the Anthem of Eras theme. So yeah, aside from that, everything else kind of in the chorus part is original. We have the strings picking up a lot of the rhythm here. I really love the string part, and it was played really wonderfully by both orchestras. So strings really take the focus here. These articulations are kind of asking the players to play really short and tight, and then put stresses on certain notes, and then play these kind of phrases very smoothly together. And then when we have the brass come in for a little tiny bit, they just interject with these ba-dum-bum, ba-dum-bum, which is a nod to Anthem of Eras, actually, because it's those intervals, the da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. And then the chorus finishes with this big Flame Reaver motif right at the end, with some crazy chords to finish on as well, which kind of came from the fact that I really wanted to do this B flat to C chord movement at the end, which sounds like this in the bass line. But I really wanted the Flame Reaver theme, there's 2 ending notes of the da, da, to also happen at the same time. And a tricky thing is that this is a B flat, and a G is not in the chord of B flat. There's an F sharp. There's an F in B flat, not a G. And then with C, there's an F sharp in the melody, and there is not an F sharp in the chord of C. There was a G. So you've got these very clashy notes, and so I kind of had to put in a whole bunch of extensions and do some funky voicing stuff. They do sound very out there as chords, I think. But I think I got away with it. Sounds lush. What building all that tension at the end of the chorus does in those last chords is that it kind of helps with the way that the tension is then resolved and released by changing key. You can see we've got a big key change here. We go from D major, or sometimes in D mixolydian, and then switching to D major at times, which I think we switched to D major actually in the pre-chorus. So we're switching modes throughout. Which is a very, this is all music inspired by ancient Greece, and the modes that we use today all have Greek names. They were how ancient Greek musicians thought about music, was like through these modes. So the fact that the song is constantly moving through all these modes is kind of cool. This one is kind of flirting with 2 modes. It's kind of flirting with a natural minor key, Aeolian mode, but it also has these like Phrygian bits that come in. We have this flattened second degree that just makes everything sound like super dark, and that was to really show that, like, okay, there's a turning point now in the story, and the key change into this relative minor key from D major to D minor is to show that. And Odie kind of mentioned like where these melodies came from the battle hymn of the Golden Blooded. We have that in the choir part in particular, and what they're saying here: "Phainon anesti ek nekron, thanaton patisas." Rise again. So there are lyrics on the original OST track for this, and I couldn't make them out, and there's no resources online for like what they actually were or anything. So what I wanted to do was to find some Greek to use, and that took me on a rabbit hole of searching for ancient kind of Greek poetry, which didn't really come up with a lot that I could really use or make sense of. And so what I ended up looking at was some like ancient, well, not ancient Greek, but some like old Greek religious passages that are kind of used in like Greek Orthodox religious services. Reason being is that like this is a story about a character who rises again from death, and there's obviously going to be a lot of parallels in that with a certain religious figure. Originally, this name here did not say Phainon. It said the word Christos, which I'm sure you can imagine what that means. And it roughly translates as Phainon is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death. I thought that was quite cool, a little bit ominous as well, because the way that Phainon is kind of trampling down death by death, I think you can interpret is the fact that he is having to essentially kill his friends as Flame Reaver as a way of actually saving them and continuing the cycles of Amphorius going. At least that's my understanding of the story, which might be off. Yeah, so he's kind of trampling down death by death in that kind of way. He is defeating death with death in that kind of way. So when I found this verse and I saw the translation of it, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I can just swap out Christos for Phainon, and that will kind of work. As well as that, we have that Flame Reaver folk motif, which now sounds way more darker with the instrumental that's underneath this. These big D minor chords instead of these major chords. That then rise up a semitone, give it that Phrygian sound. Makes the whole thing sound really dark. And these are all harmonizing in open fifths as well. Which is usually a big no in choral writing, especially if you've kind of gone through music school. They're like, parallel fifths are bad, you should never do parallel fifths. But moving in parallel motion like this does create this very stark, bare, powerful, and something that sounds a bit more like almost ancient and primal in its kind of sound. And a lot of early music that we have evidence for did make use of kind of parallel fifths, and there are lots of cultures and folk cultures and even European cultures as well that used these kind of open fifths sounds. Aside from an octave, which is two notes are the same, but in one is an octave higher than the other. A fifth is like the next most consonant, most in tune, most simplest interval to kind of come up with. So I think it's something that's kind of baked into our DNA. It sounds very primal to us. And therefore it can sound quite a little bit dark and scary, I think, as a result too. So yeah, as we then move into the next section, we continue with this dark sound.
So we can keep on fighting for tomorrow. You raised your voice, kept the faith, took them away. You shielded me and took the pain so I could stay.
So then as we get into verse 2, we are now telling the story of how the Chrysoseirs have all fallen one by one, and how Phaenon is kind of carrying on without them and remembering them. And we have this part again. This is a choral part in Battle Hymn of the Golden Blooded track. Again, didn't know what the lyrics were for this bit. So this is actually the second part of the same verse that I found, which by the way is called Pascal Troparion or Christos Anesti. And this is the second part of that phrase, which is Kai tis en tis minimasi, I think so. Zo in kari sa menos. I've written it out phonetically here to help the performers say it correctly, but it's not spelled like this in Greek, in kind of old Greek. But this section means, and to those in the tombs granting life. So it's the second part of this sentence. So if we kind of read it all together, the full meaning is Phaenon is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and those in the tombs granting life. Again, I think it leans into this idea of kind of Phaenon is trying to keep everyone alive, everyone who's doomed to die, and even those who he has killed, those who he's put in the tombs, will be granted life by the cycle restarting. So yeah, I felt like there were lots of parallels in this verse, even though, it's obviously from a different origin. In the second part of this verse, then, we also have the female vocals, which I just chose the thanaton part of that phrase, which is the, like, death by death part of the verse. So it sounds really foreboding and ominous, and it's all in these parallel fifths as well. In the original as well, this is sung in this very like nasal kind of way, and bless them, when the Budapest Scoring Choir sang this, they sang it way too nice sounding, like they sounded too good and and too pretty, and so I had to ask them, like, could you sing it as like nasally as possible, like resonate in your nose as much as possible? I was having to explain this over Zoom, by the way, because they were in Budapest and I'm in the UK. And yeah, they did a take where they all just sang really like nastily and nasally, and I could hear them and like see the looks on their faces where they all like had this thing of like, that sounded terrible, and I was on Zoom being like, that sounded great, do it again, just like that. And it does sound great. It sounds like really intimidating and foreboding, which is exactly what I wanted from that. We've also got the other parts of the choir doing these like breathy, like ha, which is also a texture that's included in that battle hymn OST. We have the Bouzouki as well, playing these little motifs here. Which also comes from the Touch of the Broken Blade Flame Reaver music. And then we have a whistle as well that brings in something that came later on. This was the last part that was added to the song, and it was added much, much later than everything else, because this was after a later patch came out that expanded upon Finon's story. And we finally had a piece of music that felt like it was kind of not necessarily Finon's theme, maybe, but kind of attached to Finon in a way. And that's a piece of music that's called When Darkness Spreads, and it's played here on the tin whistle. And it's a piece of music that is kind of used in a situation where Finon is really at a low point. Things are quite despondent, and he's kind of remembering the journey and how they've got there and trying to find hope with Cyrene. And so, yeah, and also the whole idea of When Darkness Spreads is the whole name of this piece of music as well. So it felt very appropriate to put this in this verse 2, which is kind of also all about that. The second pre-chorus kind of does more or less what the first pre-chorus does too. So nothing really more to add there. But what we do get, though, as we lead into the second chorus is a very different texture and a few other little details too.
I'm holding on to something deep inside. I'll chase the fire, I'll take the fall. The golden blood is standing tall. The deliverer's arms will carry us all till we reach the end and rise again. We'll rise again.
So then throughout this section, we have a few more little motifs that are kind of brought in that weren't in there before. And one of them is a little Easter egg to our second song, Never Fall. So the second part of Rise Again is Never Fall, very intentionally written that way in terms of their song titles. They're supposed to mirror each other in lots of ways, sort of parallels. But yeah, we have this melody. It's in the tin whistle. This was also added much later on at the same time as that other tin whistle part in verse 2 with the When Darkness Spreads motif. We added these at the same time, and that was to, again, to tie this into the second song that we wrote after Rise Again. So we can hear that here. And that interweaves with where we've got the border pipes back, we've got the harp, we've got the guitar. It's being fingerpicked, and these really lush chords with all these extensions on. This one's my favorite one because sharp 11ths are my favorite. And the Bouzouki as well, playing with the choir on these like swells. Actually, this score is incorrect. When I wrote these swells, they started on the first beat of the bar and phrased like this. What happens that once they were recorded and kind of heard it in everything together with real instruments now and not with just with sample instruments and MIDI, was that the choir was just sort of getting lost and muddying everything, because at this point you had the border pipes and you had the lead vocals. And so what I actually did is that I moved all of this back, essentially kind of moved it back to start on the next bar. So if I just quickly do this to show you, woo, if it will let me. Essentially, this is what we had instead. I wonder if this will work. Yeah, essentially that. I'm going to undo it just in case I messed up something on the back of this, but that ended up working really well. Well, that was something that happened in the edit. So yeah, we've got the fiddle as well, kind of emphasizing the Anthem of Eras motif too. It's very sparse texture here. The high strings join in halfway through with the rising kind of, don't really know what to call this. It's like one of the just like Honkai style rail motifs. It's in like almost all the main themes throughout the game. So that comes in there. Super, super lush chords. just highlighting all of the extensions of the chords, these clashes, just like really beautiful dissonances. Which it was crazy to me that the Budapest choir sight read these intervals, and like some of these have like fairly awkward jumps between them and stuff, and they sight read it, and it sounded amazing. So yeah, we then also get this melody in the harp and the bouzouki. Which again is that Anthem of Eras motif. It sounds like far more somber now that it's kind of being harmonized in this way. And then the Flame Reaver rising motif at the end. And following that, we have a kind of recapitulation of the intro. We go back to the Wandering Rhymes motif with the new lyrics now. So we're kind of like expanding on. It's almost like the next verse of the folk song. So let's have a listen.
Light, heaven's blessing shining bright, never knowing they were born for the fight. Golden blooded, the heroes chase the flame, round again, but the story stays the same.
Following that little crack there was the sound of the battle music sound effects. And then we get the spoken line, which is supposed to be from Cyrene.
So long, Kaslana.
We are completely in Flame Reaver territory now. So yeah, after that recapitulation of the intro section, slightly different lyrics to kind of show that the story is progressing, and to allude to the kind of time loop of Amphorius, with it restarting and being reborn again and again and again, and that minor key Anthem of Eras also coming in underneath in the male voices in the choir. We then have this gap with the battle sound effects, the glass shattering, and then that kind of that ominous kind of drone, and that is to kind of show like we're getting into the boss fight with Flame Reaver now. So from now on, everything that we hear, this is like pure Flame Reaver as Flame Reaver is meant to be. Nothing is being changed into a major key version to hide it or to make it sound more like Finon. This is Flame Reaver Central. So we have this melody, that rising is everywhere. It's in the string section, it's in the choir, and then we also have that melody, that folk melody. That was a kind of interpolation of, it does have some of my own original little bits written into it to expand it, but it's based on that Flame Reaver melody too, over these big chords. And then in the second part, we introduce this bass line, which is a bass line that comes from the Flame Reaver boss music as well. Super chromatic bass line. There's all just like semitones moving one after another. So it sounds really dark, it sounds really ominous. And then there's all this like really dissonant, like out of key, almost atonal sounds and strings in this one section of the Flame Reaver boss music too. I tried transcribing that as much as I could. So then once you kind of hear that in context with everything, it should sound pretty nasty. Which is very intentional. It's supposed to sound like this horror movie kind of aesthetic that Flame Reaver's boss music has. And then there's this melody that's like played quite subtly in some parts of the Flame Reaver thing, but I felt like this was just like a great, we could take this melody to end this section, to have this huge bombastic, like massive, bring the brass in. The brass haven't been in this section up until now, but bring them in just for this bit here. Sometimes you can't beat just having a massive melody played in unison by everything. There's no chords, there's no harmonies. It's just this massive melody. and that like super chromatic bass line underneath, and that's it. Everything, but it's everything pretty much is playing that apart from the choir. So it sounds huge. And then we get to the rap section. This bit's really fun. It's fun for a lot of different reasons. Awesome choreo as well for the music video. So yeah, we have this bass line that's from it's like an interpolation of one of the bass lines from Flame Reaver's Boss Music. It's being played in the low strings, and the Bodhrán as well is kind of like hitting and punching all of those bum 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 bum. And then we have these tremolo chords that are played in the strings that fill out that texture, breaths. And that melody in the bouzouki and the guitar, Flame Reaver, like folk melody kind of comes in as that all sort of builds up. Flame Reaver's vocal sound was really fun to try and recreate. I'll do like an in-depth breakdown of that in the short, I think, at some point. But just to summarize, there's essentially like 3 or 4 different layers of Rita's voice going on there. There's her normal voice as she kind of performed it. And then there is a version of that voice that is being passed through a distortion to add all of this kind of Darth Vader-y kind of quality to it, as well as being like filtered out a little bit. So some of the highs and the lows of the sound are being like cut out. And then there is also a version of her vocal that I've kind of taken all of the low frequency out whatsoever and just kept the upper highs. So it's basically just like this whisper kind of track that's just like over the top of it. And it adds this whispery like quality as well. And then there's something called formant shifting, which is a big part of this sound too. And formant shifting is something you can do in production where it's kind of like what happens when you change the pitch of a sound. When you pitch down something, not only like if you've got a recording of a voice and you use like a pitch changer to turn the pitch down, not only will the pitch change, but the tone of the sound will begin to change as well. The lower in pitch something, it will start sounding less like my voice wouldn't sound like this if I had said something higher and then it had pitched it down, it would sound more like this instead. It gets this darker kind of tone. And the same if you go opposite, it gets this kind of like tinny kind of like the frequencies that are being emphasized in the sound change. What formant shifting does is that it allows you to get that tonal change that happens when you pitch shift something whilst not changing the pitch. So you can keep the pitch the same, but it's changing which harmonics of the voice are being emphasized, and that tonal change that happens instead. So what I've done is that I've formant shifted Rita's voice down a whole bunch, and it creates that Flame Reaver kind of sound, because that's basically what they've done to Flame Reaver's voice in the game as well. So yeah, I spent a lot of time listening to Flame Reaver speak and trying to create that with Rita's voice as well by layering her voice with all these different effects on too. I'm pretty happy with what we got at the end. I think it sounds really good. It's not completely identical to how Flame Reaver sounds, but I think it sounds close enough while also sounding good musically in the mix too, which is a very important thing to do. So yeah, let's have a look at the next part.
You want it encore, so now it's starting now. I'll take the fire, I'll chase the north.
We also have, like, as this tension kind of builds in this section, the strings start coming in, like the upper strings playing this super high semitone thing here. We can hear that in context with everything else. Again, comes from Flame Reaver's theme, and as this grows and grows and grows, it gets more and more dissonant, so the other violins start joining in with some nasty harmonies to it. which sounds gross. And that's exactly how it should sound. It sounds really terrifying and sinister and horror movie-like. And while that's happening, the choir take that rising flame reaver melody and we add some lyrics onto it. Now, the concept that we had for the end section of this song came from Rita from musical, was it Nerdy Prudes Must Die? And there's a song at the end of that musical, I believe, called Dirty Dudes Must Die. And there's this kind of thing that happens where you have like these melodies that are being sung that are then interwoven with like a choir behind the lead vocalist that is like ominously, forebodingly singing something else. And so we wanted to try and capture that. What I wanted to do was to try and see how far we could push it by having Finon and Flame Reaver interchanging their melodies with one another, whilst also having this choir in the background that is also singing its own thing too. And so, yeah, I'm really kind of happy with what we got in the end. But it was tricky not only to write, but it was really, 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 really tricky to mix. Trying to find space for all these things and get them coming through as clear as we could was really tough, particularly with all the orchestra stuff as well and the percussion. In the end, I think the choir doesn't come through like super, super clearly in the mix, particularly like it's hard to make out exactly what the words are saying, but I think that's kind of fine. Like at the end of the day, they are more a texture than the focus. The focus should be on the two kind of dueling vocals between Finon and Flame Reaver. But the lyrics are flames of anger burning, wheels of fate keep turning, why do you keep fighting, rise again for nothing, being sung on that rising melody. It's also a cool thing that I've literally only just thought of, but I think it's cool that like the song is called Rise Again, and it's basically the entire song is based off this one rising motif. So it all kind of makes sense. So yeah, so then the horns are kind of adding the harmony, filling out the harmony in this part. And then interestingly on the border pipes, I really, really, really wanted this melody played on the border pipes. It was really important that we got the Flame Reaver theme on the pipes at the end for me. Issue is, that note's not possible on the border pipes. That accidental. As is the case with a lot of folk instruments, chromatic notes, so notes outside of a key, are very hard. A lot of folk instruments, particularly woodwind instruments or wind instruments or any instrument that involves wind, pretty much limited to a scale that instrument can naturally do, which is normally they will have like they'll usually have like two keys that they comfortably can play in. Depending on the instrument, they can slightly fake some accidentals better than others. This was one of the accidentals that was an absolute like, nope, can't fake it. In the end, there was two options. Either the instrumentalist could like put some tape over one of the holes or something on the chanter of the pipes, and we'd be able to get that note, but we'd have to record that phrase just like on its own, because they wouldn't be able to switch between playing the naturalized version of that the naturalized version of that note and the sharp version of that note. So it'd have to be like record this phrase first and then record that one second, or they were just like, I'll just play that G sharp as a G natural instead, and then you can like Melodyne tune it afterwards. And that's what we decided to do instead. So Melodyne came in clutch. Melodyne allowed me to have the musical idea that I wanted that was physically impossible. And I'm glad, because it sounds great. But yeah, unfortunately, I guess the pipes just aren't built to do that thing. So yeah, at the end you can see like the strings get super dense and super dissonant with all of these clashing notes, and everything is rising and building. And then we also have the vocals at the end overlapping. So let's have a listen to how this all culminates then at the end of the song. And it all serves basically to create this kind of feeling of futility and hopelessness and fear and dread that kind of comes with the not only the revelation of who Flame Reaver is, which is obviously something that is like deeply shocking, upsetting, and traumatic for Finon, but also this idea of that, like, Finon maybe realizing that, like, the deaths of all of his friends might have been completely for nothing and completely in vain, which is a horrible thing to try and think about and come to terms with after trying to cope with this trauma that at least their deaths would be for something. And so finishing the song on that question, was it worth all the fallen, was really important there. And it's being sung in unison by the choir and also by the children's choir too, who join in for this last section as well. I wanted to kind of create this feeling. Originally the children's choir weren't going to be in the ending section of the song, but I wanted to tie it back into the music from the beginning of the song to tie in with the end in that kind of sound. But the original concept of why we had the children's choir was we wanted to get this feeling of like Finon and Cyrene kind of growing up in this peaceful place, and maybe this song was like a song that they heard in their childhood. It's why actually in the second time you hear the children's choir, you have two soloists singing, and they're meant to represent Finon and Cyrene as kids kind of singing this folk song to each other. And so I wanted to bring those voices back, partly because there's also a part of the story is like their hometown getting sort of destroyed in this attack. From what I remember, I must admit my lore is rusty. But it was almost like the voices of those who have been lost from their hometown as well, coming back to haunt Finon, as well as the voices of the Chrysos heirs kind of coming back. It's all in Finon's head, but these are the questions that are kind of resounding in his head. Why is he fighting? Was it worth all the fallen? And then we finally finish with the "Now It's Your Turn," which is being spoken by Flame Reaver to Finon, or maybe it's Finon now to himself. It kind of is Castellana, and that kind of ties everything together and will take us into Never Fall, the second part of this song. I really hope you've enjoyed Rise Again. If you've not watched it yet, I don't know why you've watched all the way to the end of this video and not watched the Rise Again music video itself. So please go and give that a watch, comment on it. If you've got any questions about this song and about the production of it, then you can leave them below. At some point, myself and Rita will be doing a Q&A video about Rise Again and Never Fall. So I'd love to know what your questions are. If you've liked what you listened to, then please, you can go ahead and subscribe. It really helps out. It keeps you notified. And particularly if you like the music that I do, hopefully you'll get to see more of it. Over here, you can click on some other behind-the-scenes videos that I've done, specifically for Music Box of Fate earlier this year, where I broke down the lyrics and also reacted to some reactions to Music Box of Fate with Starlight Daryl. You can also check out my other HoYoFair songs that I mentioned earlier on in the video. Thank you very much for listening. Please watch and stream Rise Again. I'm not actually sure if Never Fall will be out by the time that this goes up, but if it is, you can stream that too, in which case also our HoYoVerse EP will be out. So please go stream that too. It has a collection of everything HoYoVerse related that myself and Rita Kamishiro have done so far, including a couple of self-covers of Rise Again and Never Fall, and the first streaming release of Hop, which was one of our ZZZ fan songs that we did too. So go ahead and listen to that. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you guys all again soon.